Hi, warm welcome to our latest Generation podcast. It's great to have you all here, whether you're viewing us or whether you're listening in the car. My guest today is an old friend of mine, Kenneth Ferguson. Kenneth just now is, I don't know what his job description is. He's an independent charity consultant. I always think consultant is a great job description. Kenneth, welcome.
Thank you, David. Nice to be with you.
Okay, can you just tell us, independent charity consultant is a really interesting thing. Well, what sort of stuff do you do these days and who do you work with?
Well, my background is I was a chartered accountant for my sins, but I found that too exciting. So I decided to look for other things. I've got quite a varied background and I've been in the profession, been in the chartered accountancy profession. I've also been in academia, been in the civil service. So I've got lots of different kind of experiences, been in business. But over the last 10 years, I've been in charitable grant making, and that's been my main sort of focus. We've been looking at kind of philanthropic grant making, so assessing applications about who do we work with, who do we fund, and really, really rewarding area to be in. But recently, and some of your readers or some of your listeners may be aware, I had a change of career, and not by choice, but through falling out, basically because of my Christian views with my previous employer, the Robertson Trust. And so I found myself in a situation of what do I do? And God is good. God has been very good, and he opened 3 really good doors for me and didn't need to apply. The people came to me and said, Kenneth, are you at a loose end? Would you like to work with us? So I work for 2 different charitable foundations. One of them is the Vardy Foundation, and that's Sir Peter Vardy, and the other is the McClellan Foundation of Chattanooga, which is a very large international Christian funder who've been coming to Scotland, working in Scotland, but I'm helping them develop that work in terms of the grant making, and both with a focus on Christian grant making, which is really rewarding and a great area to work with. The other area, a bit different again, and that's with Premier Christian Radio and helping them develop their work in Scotland. They were very aware that they were perceived as being very London-centric, although being a national broadcaster and media trust, and therefore they wanted to try and develop their work in Scotland. And I've been very privileged and delighted to be involved in helping develop that work. So 3 different hats, but they all keep me very busy.
Yeah, that's a great story. And to our listeners, if you want to find the backstory, just Google Kenneth Ferguson, the Robertson Trust, and there'll be some reading material there for you.
And go to the Christian Institute. Go to the Christian Institute website. Really, really good coverage of it. The Christian Institute have been fantastic in terms of supporting me during this battle. Yeah,
the Christian Institute have been so good in these public square issues and in your situation and other situations as well. There's one just now involving one of our own congregations in Stirling Free Church, of which you are also, by happy coincidence, an elder. Kenneth, tell us a little bit about your background. I'm really interested where you were brought up and how you became a Christian.
Thank you. Well, I had the privilege of being brought up in a Christian house. Both my parents are Christians. My grandparents, my great-grandparents, my great-great-grandparents were all Christians, and we're all Baptists. And so I was brought up.
Isn't it interesting how covenant faithfulness goes down the generations? So maybe us Presbyterians have got it right after all.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's been very much the case. And so that was a great privilege being brought up that way. I suppose as a young person that sometimes I look back, or at the time, it didn't feel like a privilege. At times it felt like a hardship, where every Sunday we go, and it was Sunday service in the morning. Then there was Bible class after church, and then there was the evening service. And, that felt like a whole Sunday kind of taken up as a young person growing up in that. But I would say that I was touched by God, and I was touched by God at different times in my young life. And I remember being touched really quite significantly when I was about 8 or 9, and really feeling that God was real. And then kind of drifting away from it, and went into my teens and kind of, I suppose, really went quite far away from it. And although I still went to church, but I kind of didn't really want to do it. And anyway, went. And when I was about 15, I started going to a youth fellowship in Dunblane, because I was brought up in Dunblane. And I started going there, not for the church that I went to, but it was a local Church of Scotland, and they had a youth worker there. And some people may know Duncan Strathdee, and he was the youth worker there. And I was just very influenced by him, very influenced by the depth of his faith and by the realness of God in his life. And that really affected me. And I really kind of went on a journey then to find out, well, who is this? And I really recommitted my life in a significant way. And I can remember that night very clearly. And I remember reading John 14 after it, about set your troubled heart at rest, trust in me. And it just really resonated with me, went deep into my heart. And just from then on, it was kind of like serious business. And so I would say that was the point when I really kind of committed my life. And Duncan was great, really helped me in terms of my journey for those 3 years when I was still at home before I went off to university. And I really kind of, it gave a good foundation for starting the Christian walk. And then on to university after that.
Yeah, you went to university in Edinburgh, which doesn't make you a bad person.
I think it makes you a better person.
Well, what one could argue about that. Now, you were involved in commerce, your chartered accountancy, civil service, in business, and you moved from that into what we call third sector. Now, I know that there's a really interesting story there. Tell us that story.
Well, it's interesting because my wife says to me, she said, you only move when God absolutely takes you by the scruff of the neck and moves you when kicking and screaming. And that was really what happened with my move from business. I'd been in business, working in business. I actually worked with my brother for about 15 years. And it got to the point where the business, to be honest, wasn't doing very well, and we were struggling a bit with it. But anyway, I was coming back for a meeting. I'd been down in North Berwick, coming back for a meeting, going around the Edinburgh bypass, coming onto the M8 just at Hermiston Gate. And I was doing probably about 70 miles an hour in the outside lane, might have been doing a wee bit more. And suddenly there was this black thing, just came from nowhere. And what it was a Mitsubishi 4x4. They call it the Mitsubishi Warrior. And it came over the barrier and landed right on top of my car.
Wow, that was a big body to hit you, yeah.
It was a big thing to hit me. And I came round in the wreckage. And it's funny because I was able just to kind of move slightly. And there was just this scene of total mayhem, bits and pieces of car and debris everywhere. And this car was literally impacted right into the front of my car. And it was upside down. And there was a chap sitting in it with a seatbelt on. He had a shirt and tie on. He was upside down. And people are shouting, get them out, get them out. And I said, it's too late, he's dead. And this chap was literally, I could have just about reached him if I'd been able to just move slightly forward. And I remember praying and thinking, this is awful, Lord, what's happening? And I was very aware that I thought this man will have children probably, and kind of praying for him and just praying as I was stuck in this car. And I looked around and I could see everyone was going like this. And they're on their phones and they're going like that. And it was really strange. And someone came up to the side of me in the wreckage. And I remember saying to them, because people were shouting, watch out, it's going to go up. And I had a fire extinguisher under the seat of the front seat. And I tried to pass it out the window. And I said, if it goes up, could you please use this? And at that, the whole car flashed into flames. And fortunately, both vehicles were diesel. And so the flash just went and it just stopped. It didn't actually then turn into a fireball. And they got me out. And I remember coming in and out of consciousness in the ambulance. And I thought, Lord, is this it? Am I dying? And I remember very strongly feeling, there wasn't any feeling of me. It was a feeling for my daughter. My daughter was about 9 at the time. And I thought, please don't let me die for her sake, because I don't want her to be left on her own without a father at this stage. And I was quite agitated as well, because I was saying, to the ambulance staff, what about my wife? What about my daughter? They weren't in the car, but I didn't know if they were. They'd been in the car. And they were trying to reassure me, saying, no, they're not in the car. But I do remember praying, Lord, just please spare me so that I can bring up my daughter. And took me to hospital, and lo and behold, I had no serious injuries. I had whiplash in my neck, and I had a twisted leg, and that was it. And they kept me in for 48 hours because they couldn't believe that I wasn't seriously injured, because I should be dead. And in fact, I was lying in bed, and the policeman came up to me, and he came up, and the first thing he did was he rubbed my arm. I sort of looked at him, and he said, I just want some of your luck. He said, I've been a traffic policeman for 33 years. He said, I'm due to retire next month. He said, when we arrived, he said, I've never seen an accident like this head-on collision at such impact. And we came up and said, double fatality. And when you survived it, and look at you, you're unharmed. And he said, it's a miracle. And I said, well, I believe it is. I said, I believe that God has spared me for a purpose. I said, I'm a Christian, and I believe that God has spared me. And he was like, wow, you are the luckiest man in Scotland. He said, make sure you buy a lottery ticket tonight, because he said, with your kind of luck, he said, you're going to win it. And so I thought it was quite humorous with hindsight. But yeah, I was very, very fortunate to survive it. I came out of hospital, and I came back home, and I said to my wife, I said, I don't want to go back to work. And she said, oh, what do you mean you don't want to go back to work? And I said, I feel God has spared me for something. I feel He's spared me for a greater purpose, for something new. And she said, well, what do you want to do? And at that time, I'd been spending a lot of my time working with young people and supporting youth work. And as many of your listeners will know, Meredith Murchison, who unfortunately died a few years ago now, but I was working with Murdo in our spare time, trying to set up basically Christian youth workers in Stirling, in the churches in Stirling that didn't have them. And I suppose it comes back to my point about Duncan Strathdee, because what I had seen was the impact of someone of deep faith, who was young and a good role model. And what I wanted to do was replicate that. And so we've been working on that, trying to see if we could set that up. And we've been fundraising, and we'd actually been successful. And we'd actually got one youth worker in place in Stirling. And I wanted to do more of that kind of thing. I wanted to work with young people. And I said, well, I want to work with young people. And I said, maybe because I'm a chartered accountant, maybe I could be a finance director in maybe a charity, something like that, for young people. And I said, there's a good one in Stirling, which obviously I live in Bridge of Allen, so it's only 4 miles away. I said, someone like Aberlour Childcare Trust, where they work with young people from really disadvantaged backgrounds and help them. And so my wife said to me, well, are you going to drop your CV in? And I said, no. And she said, do you know any of them? I said, no. And that was on a Tuesday. And on the Friday, on the front page of the Herald appointment section, it was Finance Director, Aberlour Childcare Trust.
Incredible.
And my wife said to me, I think God's saying something to you, Kenneth. Apply for that job, because I really feel you're going to get it. And it was the only job I applied for. And lo and behold, I got it. And I started work very quickly. And what I did was, as I was saying, I worked with my brother, and I said to him, look, I want to go and do this. So off I went to do that. And I remember just before doing that, that what happened was that we actually had to sign part of the business into administration. And so I was up in the lawyer's office, and I was sitting there, and he said to me, what are you going to do, Kenneth, now? I said, oh, I'm leaving. I said, after my accident, I was there in my crutches. And I said, I'm leaving, and I'm wanting to go and work in a charity. And he said, what do you think you'd do? I said, well, maybe one day I could be chief executive of a charity. I've got ambition to try and help people, and help particularly young people. And I said, oh, that's really interesting. And anyway, went off and worked in Aberlour, and I worked there for 3 years. And then one of the funders of Aberlour is the Robertson Trust. So I said, well, I thought this would be great. Let's go and see if I can apply for that. So I applied for the chief executive's job at the Robertson Trust. And got that job and started work there. And they were based in a small office just off Bath Street in in Glasgow, further up at Berkeley Street. And they said to me when I joined, well, we're looking for bigger offices, and but we haven't been able to find anything. So I said, well, would you give me a month and I'll see what we can come up with? Because they'd said, well, we've got a lease that we could sign on this office. And I'd had a look at it and it didn't look good at all. And I said, well, I think we could come up with something better. So anyway, went and had a look. And lo and behold, the office that I had signed the business into administration 3 years before was up for sale. And we bought it as the Robertson Trust and turned it into our offices, but also into a charity hub where we supported other charities to come in and share space with us. Because we only needed about 2,000 square feet, and this building was 16,000 square feet. So lots of extra space. So it ended up, we had 40 charities in there. We had a cafe, we had a meeting space, conference centre, and it was just great. It really worked.
It's a real resurrection story, because you have the dying seed of one enterprise,
yes,
and the growing seed of a new one. Yeah.
Indeed.
That's tremendous. Well, our time is somewhat limited.
Sorry, I beg your pardon. I'm talking too much. I'm talking too much.
No, I could listen to you all day, but we've only got a 40-minute window here, and I've so much to talk about. One of the things about Premier, and you've spoken about your involvement there. One of the things that they've been involved in, and we spoke recently, a few months ago, to what was the guy called?
Paul Caminetti.
Paul Caminetti, that's right. And Paul spoke a little bit about the Immerse program. I know that, in fact, I only need to mention Immerse, and it's like Pavlov's dogs. You are immediately on there, and you can go on about it for 2 hours.
Indeed.
Very briefly, can you just explain what Immerse is and tell us just maybe 1 or 2 stories about your involvement with it?
Yes. Immerse comes out of the desire for Biblica. It was Biblica, the Bible printing company, the publisher, for people to read the Bible. And they said, well, how can we try and get people to read the Bible and to read it together? Because when we look back to the Old Testament, particularly the New Testament, how did people read the Bible? And they read it together, and they would have read it not in chapters and verses, but they would read the text. And so what they did was they produced the Bible without chapters, without verses, and in the order in which it actually flows together into themes. And that resulted in the Bible effectively becoming 6 books and 6 stories then that it has been split into effectively. And obviously the most important one is called Messiah. And it so happens I have one here. Wow. And that's the New Testament, but it's ordered in a completely different way. So it starts with Luke, and then it goes on to Acts, and then it does Paul's letters, and then it does Mark and Mark's letters, and with Peter, and that kind of thing. So a very different approach. And the other thing about it is that, as I was saying, it's got no chapters and no verses, because, as you know, these were much later additions that were put into the text. And actually what it does is it splits it up into, if you like, a daily reading, and you read for 5 days out of 7. And then you come back into your group on the 7th day, and you discuss it.
So it's like a book club.
It's a book club. It's a Bible book club, and you come back and you talk about what have you learned, what has struck you about God, how might it impact your life, and it has been totally profound because I thought I want to do one of these myself. And so I lead the house group. I lead a house group in Stirling Free Church, and Ian McCaskill, minister, very kindly allowed me to trial this. And I have never used anything as good as this. Right. It has been profound in terms of just how it has enriched the Christians, but also it has been really interesting in attracting people who have come with no church background. A really interesting story on that was my wife, who is just an amazing evangelist in her life. She just talks to people about God and about Jesus. And anyway, a woman in the village, and she was talking to her, and this woman had said, no church background, I would really love to read the Bible. She said, my mother read it to me as a child, and she said, I remember that very fondly. But I look at the Bible and I can't really think how to start this. Do I start right at the beginning and just work my way through whatever? And my wife said, well, come into this group that we're about to start, she said, and see what you
do. Do you do it through Zoom or is it in person?
In person. In person. So there's 8 of us meet once a week. And anyway, this lady came along, no church background whatsoever, and took the book. And on the second week, she said, this is just fabulous. She said, I can't help. I can't stop reading. I'm reading way ahead. And she said, how do I become a Christian?
Wow.
And just amazing, just such a blessing, to be able to tell her about how to become a Christian and for her to take that step. And she has been on fire. Every week that she comes back, she's got these great questions. She's saying, now what about, she said, no, it says in this bit, it says in Luke about this, but it says in Matthew about that. How do you reconcile it? She's just bringing it all together. And that's what this does. It gives you that different view of the Bible. And I think, coming through church, we are so used to thinking in terms of chapters and verses and really diving almost into the detail. And suddenly this is really about the big stories of the Bible and about the big themes, about God's purpose. And of course, the purpose is Messiah. And everything leads towards that. And so you start with Messiah, you start with the New Testament, and then you go back and then you look at beginnings, as it's called. So it's Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, and you look at that then as the next book. And what it does is you end up reading, so we read the New Testament in 8 weeks and discussed that in-house, in the book club in 8 weeks. And the Christians who were there said, some of them actually said, well, to be honest, I've never read the whole of the New Testament before. And they said, this has been really, really changing to them. But it's been interesting because some of them, particularly the ones who have got a long kind of Christian backstory, have said, actually, it's quite difficult to start with because they're used to chapters and verses. And they found that committing to maybe 20 pages of reading per day over the week was quite a lot. And but then what happened was, as they got into it, and as they got particularly into the discussions once a week, it really started to become something that was very meaningful to them. And several of them said this is the best thing they've ever done in church, which I'm really humbled to hear. This is the best thing that they've ever done. And it isn't just the book, because there's a website, and on the website there's a little video, and that sets you up for the week. So we always watch that before we start discussing the week, and we watch the next week's at the end of our book club. Plus, also what has been really helpful is that each day there is an audio file that you can basically listen to of the readings of that day. So quite a lot of them have enjoyed, like they will with your podcast, in the car or when they're doing their ironing or when they're doing different things. It means that they can actually listen to the Bible being read to them for that day's reading. And quite a lot of what they've done is the people in the group, they've read and they've listened, and they combine the two. And maybe listening first and then reading has helped in terms of just getting the bigger picture out of it. But it has been really, really powerful. And as we're coming to the end of it, I said to them, right, okay, we're coming to the end of the New Testament. We've done our 8 weeks. What do you want to do next? Do you want to focus on one of the books that we've read and we kind of go into more depth? And unanimously, they all said, no, we want to read the whole Bible. We want to take this now and go right through the Bible. And we want to actually have read it. And I kind of thought, oh, right, this is going to be quite different. We started with Genesis, and we've read Genesis. We're just about finishing Exodus. And people are saying, this is fantastic. Love it. Really love it, because I see the big picture. I see the stories. I can follow through the stories, like the Joseph story, and how you read that in a sense as a oneer. That is just fantastic reading that.
Great.
So that's Immerse.
Yeah, I mean, you're excited. I'm catching the vision holder up again, so as our folk can see it. It's for our listeners. It's a very colourful book, and I think it's that one's called Messiah. It's called Immerse. Again, if you Google, what would you Google to get it?
It's immersebible.com.
Okay, immersebible.com.
And the thing is that Premier have got the rights now to distribute in the UK to the churches. So you can buy it on Amazon, but I would suggest, if at all possible, don't, because it's going to Mr. Bezos. Whereas if you buy it from Premier, then it obviously helps Premier's work on that. So if I can make that small advertisement.
That's not a problem. We're still talking to Premier in spite of cancelling one of my good friends, Mr. Robertson. But that's another story for another
story.
Okay, let me go back. I just want to talk about a couple of things before we break off. As you were growing up as a Christian, a student, young business, what has been the most effective mission tools that you've either used or witnessed? And then I'm going to talk to you just a wee bit about philanthropy, Christian philanthropy.
Yeah. I come back to that one-to-one. I come back to that ability to have a deep relationship, that the importance of the one good adult or the one good individual. I think that's so powerful. I think human beings, we're wired to have relationship. And in a sense, I think the human relationships are a reflection of God's relationship with us, because that's what he wants with us, is that relationship. And I think that evangelism, when it works really well, is when it's someone that's able to really kind of come alongside and you actually share life rather than just give you a few words or a tract or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, that's linking with stuff we spoke about with a guy called Dan Strange a couple of podcasts back, called Making Faith Magnetic. Okay, time's flying on. I'm really interested in Christian philanthropy. I mean, you've worked with a number of kind of, high value individuals over the course of your life. I spent a lot of time in the USA, and I noticed, for example, that there's a bigger culture of philanthropy in the US, Christian philanthropy, than there is in Scotland or the UK. Why is that? Is it the tax system, or is there a bigger context?
I think with philanthropy generally in America, it's because of the tax system, and it's part of the culture as well. So they don't see government providing a lot of the things that we expect in that social pact we have with government here. I mean, a good example of that is the NHS. Obviously, it doesn't exist. The concept doesn't exist in America, but we have that social pact, I think, in the UK, where we think we pay our taxes and we expect government to actually deliver a lot of these things. In America, that's not the case, as well known. And I think that as a result of that, I think that there's an expectation that you give more and that you will help. And as you earn, you give back. And of course, that comes very much from a scriptural background. I think the tax system certainly encourages that, where you get 100% write-off of anything you give to charity. I mean, we get effectively 40% if we're high-rate taxpayers, or basic rate taxpayers. We get the 25%.
So is that the US equivalent of gift aid, or are you saying it's in the US it's 100% write-off?
Well, what happens there is a different system in that all the benefit comes back to you as the giver. Here, the benefit goes to the charity. So your tax that you've paid goes to the charity under gift aid. But in America, you get tax relief. So if I earn £20,000 in a year and I give £10,000 to charity, I get a £10,000 tax relief on that. So it's a really, really attractive way to give. So yes, there's a real encouragement, and people keep very close tabs of what they've given so they can claim it back, obviously, from the IRS. So I think that's part of the difference, but I do think there's a cultural difference as well, which magnifies that.
Well, what advice would you give to a church or an organisation that comes to a funder? What sort of things do you, as funders, look for in a good application?
What we look for is passion. What we look for is people that we can invest in, people that we think will deliver. So it's not about fancy words. It's actually about saying, this is what's on our hearts. This is what we've maybe had experience of, and this is what we're going to do. And it's a lot of the time it's about actually looking someone in the eye and thinking, yeah, this person is the real deal. This is the kind of person that will actually, deliver on it. So the worst applications we see are the copy and paste ones. And believe it or not, we get quite a lot of them. And you get it where they haven't even changed the name of who they're applying to. So you get the wrong name on it. You're like, oh, don't do this. And a lot of the time we say to them, look, come and speak to us about it. Tell us what's on your heart. Tell us what you want to do and how you're going to do it. And that's really that's a good application when we get that, and where there's a clear idea around the need, around the idea about how they're actually going to work it out and how the organization is going to actually deliver that. We call it NISO. So it's the need, the idea, the strategy, and the organization. So those are
love acronyms. I love them.
Yeah.
Okay, Kenneth, as we draw to a conclusion, the last few years for you have been, shall we say, turbulent. You've been high public profile. You've been made unemployed. You're back employment. You've been bashed about a bit. What have you learned spiritually over the last 5 years in your life? Can you give us some headlines?
I think I've learned that God is faithful and that God is unchanging. I look back, one of the verses which has been incredibly precious to me has been from 2 Chronicles, chapter 20 and verses 15 to 17. And this is Jehoshaphat facing a huge army. And God says to him, don't be afraid. The battle is not yours, the battle is mine. And that's one of the great truths I've learned, that actually it's not up to us. Our God is great. Our God will be there in the battle. It is his battle. And all we have to do, like it says, as he says to Jehoshaphat, stand and you will see the deliverance of the Lord. And that has been the challenge to me, that God has said to me, stand, just stand. That's all I need to do is stand. And that's, I think, the big lesson that I've learned in these difficult times has been to stand. I don't need to do anything. I don't have to be clever. I don't have to try and go on the offensive. I don't have to try and do down people when they're doing me down. I just have to stand. And I just have to say, my God, this is his battle and I will leave him to it.
Kenneth, thank you so much. That is quite a wonderful way to conclude. Again, to our listeners, thank you so much for hanging on in there and listening to Kenneth's story. And I would just encourage all of us to test God and see and know that he is faithful. Folks, thank you for listening to this Generation podcast. Those of you who are watching, for watching. Tell other people about it. Spread the message, and hopefully we'll give you some more great podcasts with some good content from mission from a Scottish perspective. Thank you, and thank you, Kenneth.